Well, folks, the internet has a new punching bag of the week, and this time it's Velma. Velma is a new animated series that is supposed to be a more adult adaptation of the characters from the beloved Scooby-Doo franchise. I'll explain why that's confusing a little later. And no matter which side of the political spectrum you fall on, because we have to take this into account when we consume any piece of media now, it is not being very well received. In fact, the most productive thing the show is doing is keeping the lights on in the Quartering's basement for the next few weeks. In preparation for this video, I watched the first 2 episodes of Velma that are currently out, and they are not good, and I'll talk about why, but that's not the most interesting part of the story for me here. You see, in this series, Velma is voiced by Mindy Kaling, who has become a rather polarizing figure in pop culture for a few reasons that we'll talk about. But Mindy is not actually the main creator behind this show. That would be Charlie Grandy, a nepo baby who is the son of former Love Boat actor turned politician Fred Grandy. Charlie isn't really the face of this production, despite the fact that he presumably was as involved in it as Mindy was, and Mindy is currently serving as the target for what the chuds don't like about it, and what normal people also don't like about it. But before we get into what's wrong with Velma, I think we have to take a look back at Mindy Kaling's slow fall from grace, because it's one of the more interesting narratives happening in Hollywood. For those who don't know, Mindy Kaling is a writer, comedian, producer, and actress who first got her start in the hit show The Office for her role as Kelly Kapoor. Kaling was also a writer on the series and just one woman on a staff of 8 people. A few years later, Mindy wrote, produced, and starred in a sitcom called The Mindy Project, which tells the story of a gynecologist trying to balance her professional and romantic life in New York City. The show ran from 2012 until 2017 and was generally well received, albeit there is one noticeable criticism that we'll come back to in a second. But for now, I have to mention that Mindy's comedy straddles a weird line with the audience that enjoys her shows. Stuff like The Office is clearly fodder for millennials who enjoy the SNL, BuzzFeed style type of humor, generally speaking, but her work also speaks to an entirely more diverse, younger, progressive audience with projects like The Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max. The humor in that show is really contemporary and definitely not for everyone, but as a 24-year-old who at one point attended a small liberal arts college in New England, I dig it a lot. But I don't know if Mindy understands that her audience has changed over the years with the new projects that she has taken on. For example, she caught some heat for saying a few months ago that The Office would definitely get canceled if it were made today. Which is a take that doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. One, because the humor in The Office isn't that risky, especially if you understand the premise that Michael Scott is like the butt of every joke. 2, because it's still wildly popular, and 3, because The Sex Lives of College Girls has a lot more provocative humor just based on the subject matter alone. But because she sort of walks this tightrope between yes, queen, cubicle girl bosses, and TikTok astrology zoomer girlies, I feel like the criticism that has been lobbied Mindy's way over the years works in relation to this moving standard of what she should be, and by proxy what her work should be, based on who's watching. To explain what I mean, let me direct you to the Jezebel article, Mindy Kaling Only Makes Out with White Guys. You see, Mindy's work on the Mindy Project has been directly tied to her life experiences for better or worse. In an interview with Us Magazine, Mindy once said that she embarrassingly loves blonde men. And you know, nothing wrong with that. You like what you like. I'm not here to present any judgment. I'm just trying to paint the picture of what's going on. But critics of the Mindy Project have argued that it's weird that Mindy's love interests are and only have ever been white men in the show. Mindy's existence in Hollywood is one that very much defies cultural hegemony and institutions, especially for this point in time. You know, she's a woman in comedy and she's of South Asian descent. So this sticking point of only interacting romantically with white male leads in the Mindy Project has at the very least been disappointing for fans of her and the show who are eager to see themselves more represented in different ways. I'm not South Asian, so I can't speak to that experience. You might think some fans are overstepping the line with this criticism, or maybe you agree with that point entirely. But this idea of Mindy only being attracted to white dudes on her shows, and that being problematic, is a common theme that goes much, much deeper. There has been a long-running conspiracy that BJ Novak, a comedian who co-starred alongside Mindy in The Office, is secretly the father of her children. Now, this may sound a little silly, but Mindy and BJ have been known for their on-again, off-again phases throughout their time in Hollywood, which wasn't made easy by the fact that their characters were dating and often going through a turbulent relationship on the actual show. Mindy and BJ have often played into the joke that they're secretly meant for each other, that their relationship is complicated. You know, it's cute. That is until Mindy started becoming more public about her 2 children, and let me just say, of course, she is absolutely entitled to her own privacy and for sure the privacy of her kids, and she absolutely does not owe anyone shit. However, fans of the show speculated that Mindy's kids are secretly BJ's kids. This conspiracy is pretty much aided by the timeline checking out, the fact that she hasn't publicly revealed the father's identity, and the fact that BJ Novak is the children's godfather. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because Mindy's preference toward white men has become memeified by her fans and detractors alike, and because a lot of the work that she does in her comedy is so personal, even when she's not, the one performing it in front of the camera. Some people feel like she's getting in the way of the potential for diverse storytelling in her own shows. So, I'm going to get into spoilers for Sex Lives of College Girls seasons 1 and 2 to better illustrate what I'm talking about here. Spoiler Juno is on the screen. Spoiler Juno, spoilering, spoiler Juno, 3, 2, 1. The Sex Lives of College Girls has been highly praised for its diverse cast and nuanced conversations, particularly in the realm of misogyny and sexuality. But like many of Mindy Kaling's shows, some aspects of it have been highly criticized due to what is perceived as Mindy's tendency to self-insert into her characters, and this is where the whole being only into white guys thing comes back to haunt her a little bit. The most obvious in-universe example is the character Bella, a South Asian college student who aspires to be a comedian and continuously throws various hookups and flames away for this white dude with glasses, which some argue mirrors Mindy's real-life experience to a T. I'd say Bella's through line on the show bothered some fans a little bit. At the very least, they were able to throw some jokes around about it on Twitter, but what really pissed people off was the developments between Whitney, Kanan, and Kimberly in the last few episodes of season 2. You see, Whitney, a black character, was dating Kimberly's coworker Kanan, another black character, for the first few episodes of season 2. People were very receptive to this idea, especially because in season 1, Whitney's whole character arc is focused on a predatory relationship between her and an older man. But then Whitney and Kanan break up, and she eventually comes to witness the first kiss between Kanan and Kimberly. This really pissed a lot of people off in the fandom, and like I said, I don't want to personally speak to the implications of this writing choice for a black character, but it ultimately ended with a lot of criticism being thrown toward Mindy's way, because it's more or less a trope that appears in a lot of the media that she's associated with, and people are getting kinda sick of it. So yeah, that's how Mindy sort of lost the goodwill of some of the Zoomer audience. Well, that combined with some small little one-off details like J.K. Rowling's tweet, because if we haven't learned anything from my last video that had something to do with HBO Max, it always somehow comes back to J.K. fucking Rowling, and the fact that Mindy's brother pretended to be black to get into medical school. That was a weird one. Anyway, now you're all caught up to present day with the release of Velma, which is getting a lot of hate right now for some of these reasons listed above, and then also the inverse of some of these reasons at the same time. Velma is, like I said, an alternate universe take on some of the most popular characters from the Scooby-Doo IP. The show takes place in high school, many of the characters are race swapped, and it revolves around Velma trying to solve a murder mystery. Now, the race swap thing was always going to get some flack regardless, because all of the media criticism in the world now boils down to get woke, go broke, or whatever that saying is. And once again, these guys need a way to pay their light bills, so they were going to hate on it regardless. But the show comes off as really out of touch and out of left field, and it doesn't seem like anyone is really in Mindy's corner on this one. Once again, only 2 episodes of the show have been released so far, which is dumb on HBO Max's part, because every reviewer and hate watcher is going to get what they need from these first 2 and then literally never revisit it again to see if it gets better or worse, but I digress. Ultimately, here is the problem with Velma. It seems like one of those poorly written, generic, paint-by-numbers animated comedies like Paradise PD or the weird Chicago Ant show that nobody would give a shit about normally, but because there's a recognizable and beloved IP slapped on top of it, people are losing their minds. That's it. It's really that simple. Forget about all of the race swapping shit and the ruining the Scooby-Doo characters. These literally aren't Scooby-Doo characters. They share the same names and some basic physical attributes, but that's about it. The whole show is soulless, all of the characters are unlikable, the plot is super unfocused and all over the place. There's no reason for it to take place in a high school because some of the humor is like weirdly very raunchy and out of pocket, and they act and sound like adults, but it's not relevant to the story the way that it is in something like Big Mouth or South Park. And the humor is like that meta brand of progressivism where they make fourth wall references to tropes of the genre and, commentate on how certain aspects of it are problematic, but like not in any way that's interesting or fun or different. It feels like it's constantly apologizing for its own right to exist. The two things that I think are done well in the show are the animation. There's some really clever artwork done with the hallucination sequences, and I think there is potential for Daphne and Velma's relationship. They have some cute moments here and there. But this is also how I know that a lot of the discourse surrounding the show is very reactionary and that most people didn't even make it past the trailer, because I don't see any of your typical chud grifters even complaining that this show has gay stuff in it because it's all in episode 2. Like, literally, they did not get that far. They don't even know that it's in there. Anyway, I think Mindy Kaling is talented, and I do like a lot of the work she's done quite a bit, but of course, that does not bar her from basic critique. I really wanted to make this video because I do think it's interesting how often folks in the public eye can fall in and out of fashion, so to speak. Mindy hasn't really done anything that warranted a permanent cancellation at any point. She's just like a little annoying, a little annoying as a treat. And when an artist is so closely tied to their projects in this way that she is, I tend to wonder if it skews people's perception of the art as a whole. But what do I know? I'm just a video essayist with too much goddamn time on her hands. Side note, I really just want to go back and watch the live-action Scooby-Doo movies after this. Those were camp, and I'll defend them with my life. I'm not taking any questions. Thank you guys so much for watching. A reminder that you can follow me here, and stay tuned for what's coming up on this channel and the second channel, Kayla Says More. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.